it's my great pleasure now to move towards to a panel discussion. I'm looking forward to discussing how we build the right strategies in a customer-first era. Today's banking customers are more demanding, have wider choices, and are more empowered. What innovative and practical approaches are banks using to put their customers first? How can banks further evolve their strategies, use of data analytics and technology to put their customers first? Are there better solutions to onboarding new customers and growing revenue? How can banks drive smarter growth under the current regulatory environment? And I look forward to having on my panel, can I invite you up as I call out your names? Javed Chowdhury, who's the regional head of credit at Standard Chartered Bank, Javed. Jared Osoro, who is my Twitter friend and much more, Director Research and Policy at the Kenya Bankers Association. Please, if you'll just, Javed, you'll go there and then Jared. Michael Nyaga, who's Head of Digital at Equity Bank. Michael, Lee, you were talking to me about the bank that had sort of dissolved the frontiers between telecom and banking, and I think Equity Bank were one of the first to do that here. Dr. Leonard Muthiga, the Director of IT at KCB, would you care to join, please? And of course, if we can have Lee Naik, the President of TransUnion Africa, and Billy has very kindly, but Billy, I think there's a chair here. Yeah. Yeah, I'll stand. I'll happily stand. And Billy as well, who's the CEO here of TransUnion Kenya. And maybe I can throw out a question first to the practitioners and turn to Michael first. Michael, your bank was very much at the forefront or at the cutting edge of this intersection point between the smartphone, which we learned is 120 million times more powerful, and the banking space. What can you just describe to us the types of things you're thinking about now? Somebody sitting in your seat, what are you thinking? I imagine one of those thoughts must be how to port this whole thing across the continent. But just tell us what's like top of mind in your mind at the moment.
Thank you, Elkan. I think we are at a very interesting point in terms of the space that we are playing in. And as you rightly state, a lot of the things that we are thinking and that keeps us awake is, what is the customer thinking? And what we've noticed is that a customer is beyond a financial transaction. You have to get into the space of the customer's lifestyle. If today you drew a web of a customer and you realize that a customer is not only centric to a mortgage product or a mobile loan product, today they are on every single site of e-commerce on that space, and today they may be a supplier to someone else. They have a string of suppliers to their own kind of business. So how do you build that network, and how do you build that particular space and get them to be always relevant to your solution, and whatever you're building for them is actually relevant to what they want to do? And that's what we're thinking every other day. So yes, you rightly put it, we got into this space and it has been an interesting journey, but the solutions you're building will have to cut across beyond the customer at a point in time as an individual. That person will move to being a corporate. How do you get into that particular space and facilitate the digital conversation on that one? So pretty much that's what
Let me ask you a question which somebody asked me. He said, Ali Khan, if you tweet about buying new furniture, I'm going to know as your banker that you're in the market possibly for a mortgage. Do you have that kind of information? Out of interest. Sorry.
I'm not sure I need to say so much, but as I'll take that conversation beyond the furniture. The conversation goes beyond, it is merchandise financing, if I was to look at it. And one of the biggest challenges we see in merchandise financial is logistics. I am in an office, I'm sitting, I want to buy that furniture, I'll get online and I see it. Do I know that you really want to get that space? Lee mentioned about unstructured data. A lot of us have got into the prey of financial transactions because that's where we're coming from. But our customer today is beyond the financial transactions. So you have to get into a particular space and engage literally into partnerships that are relevant, that tells you this customer walked in, walked out, inquired about this particular fast. Whether the walking is physically or they went on online, that is your own prerogative, and find out where that customer is. So yes, we have that access. Whether we can push it at a request and tell you we have capability to offer, that's a use case.
Interesting, thank you. Javed, Lamine was very proudly telling me a few weeks ago about the launch of the digital bank in Cote d'Ivoire. I think that's a standalone digital bank. Would you like to tell us about how Standard Chartered is responding to this new digital world, which Lee has told us is no longer the thing, it is in everything, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ali Khan, for inviting me and all of the panels here to talk about the digital era and relevant factors which has been happening under disruptive technology in the market. So this Côte d'Ivoire is actually one of our pilot project to make sure there is no brick and mortar, to ensure that you are actually a virtual customer. You can open your account from your home, sitting in your drawing room, you can transact, you can do everything. So that's a pilot project we did. It's a huge success. We're looking forward to other networks as well to do it. But I mean, to look at the broader aspect of digital era and how to look at the customer value chain, I'll just give an example, a true story. 2013, I bought my first DSLR camera in Singapore. So the smart salesman, he said, would you mind filling out this form, and then you can get a Nikon camera bag in exchange of that. So I put my email address, I put my mobile number, and there was a question, are you a first time digital DSLR camera buyer or not? I said yes. So they gave me some time to digest, but in less than 7 days time, I got something in my Facebook which got connected through the email address, an ad saying that, are you a proud owner of a digital camera? Did you know that you are not even utilizing 10% of the potential of your digital camera? Here we are to help you. So you have a 2 hour to 10 hours camera workshop which you can do. We charge $100. For now it is $50, and you can do it in next 2 months time. Took my credit card, bought it online. Just look at how they target the customer. The thing we're talking about, do I go and search for who are the customers bought the camera, and you can relate it to any other aspect. So today, just bringing back the discussion from that example is the artificial intelligence can actually tell me that, like that furniture example you give, right? That if I go to the furniture shop, probably I'm looking for a house. Now, like that digital camera, and then I'm in need of a training. So integration of artificial intelligence in the banking sector is the way to go. If you look at, how to utilize that, how to leverage more on our ecosystem, and how to utilize more the data that the partners like TransUnion is sitting with. You said, or Chad said probably you've got about 10 million active or inactive customer base where you get access to data, how you can utilize more. So at the end, the way we look at it is the era of targeting blind shooting customer is gone. You need to know the propensity analysis of at what point in time a customer need and what product. Are you going traveling with your family somewhere? How do I know that? How much money do you need? How conveniently I can provide that money to you? How can it and you said about customer propensity model in terms of how you're graduating from a bad customer to a good customer, or from a good customer to becoming a bad customer. So I think to cut the story short, combining all the information in this digital space, I think that's the way to go. Yeah, for us.
So when you're sitting at your desk and I see that your title is actually Regional Head of Credit, do you feel that you've got that information on your desktop that you need?
Not yet. I mean, we are not even, I would say, 20% of where it should be. I mean, and Kenya is a perfect example. I was talking to somebody there that, today, about, to be exact, about 38 billion US dollar transactions in a year going through mobile space, where the country GDP is less than $80 billion, which is 50% of the transaction goes through mobile space. I don't know in which country, which space you have this, access to information through the mobile, and you know the customer what they're doing. So from where I'm sitting in as a regional credit head, I see that these informations are immensely valuable for us to really leverage on. We are not there. I mean, so again, partners like TransUnion and partners like others as well. There are Credit Info, there are other partners in the market, and there are also we met a lot of people who in isolation, they are not bureau, they are not any other provider, but they are the information provider. You can know exactly in which pub, at what point in time, whether it is raining, whether it is shining, whether it is Sunday or a Saturday, at what point in time, how many customers are going, what is their age profile, what they are drinking, what they are ordering for. You can strategize your own credit profile or your need-based conversation or the strategy based on those information. So in this market, I mean, it's an amazing place. We are not there. We are not even 10-20% of where it should be.
Jared, just before I turn to you, I just wanted to ask Billy something. Billy, you were telling me earlier that your reports are going out how often? People are drawing down the reports. I think you said every 2 weeks or monthly.
No, so the consumers, those who are actively doing it,
Yeah.
in most it's most cases once a year, unless maybe they have a requirement from a consumer's perspective. I need to get a credit report because I'm applying for a role, or I need to review what's happening. So that's happening on about a once a year
From the
basis, yeah.
consumer side and from the banking
Yeah.
side.
So we look at the volumes. You have about 300,000 hits a month. And that's been going up quite a bit. So we're finding that now the banks are actually starting to plug more and more.
Because I was just
in
wondering,
terms
the
of access,
velocity of the mobile money movement, right? The sheer volume of it, the speed of it, the fact that the central bank governor said so many of the loans are taken at 4 a.m. and paid back at 6 p.m. But if are people actually getting that real-time information from the banking side as well? Do you know what I mean? Have they got real-time visibility on what is a highly it's something that's moving so quickly?
It's not as real time as we'd want it to be. However, we just finished, you'd be pleased to know, we just finished developing a new technology, a new API that would give real time data. Yeah. Currently today, for the regulated institutions, that data is shared once a month. Yeah.
So if I go out and I know the dates that this
Yes.
stuff is being shared, and I go and get myself 8 loans in the space of 1 hour, is that visible to the banks?
It's not. Today it's not, yeah? However, the real-time API, which we are very excited about, it will now enable any lender to have a real-time view of customers' behavior, even down to that day, for example, yeah? And it's becoming more important in the digital space, digital credit space, because we have about, close to 300,000 loan applications processed in a day for mobile loans. Alex, I don't know what the numbers are. We're thinking of something like that. About 100,000 disbursements. But if you think about it, today we have close to 50 mobile lenders. Even Sherlocks have become fintechs today. Yeah? But consumers, nothing stops me from going and borrowing from all these 50 within a couple of hours. Yeah. So with the real-time API, TransUnion, one of the key IP that we are working on bringing in country is around a platform that would help you be able to figure out real-time when you, say I'm KCB, yeah, and this customer wants to borrow on my mobile platform, if they ping TransUnion, would be able to give you a real-time feedback that tells you, okay, fine, yeah, he might be qualifying for what he's applying for, but guess what? He's already taken another 6 loans today on different platforms, yeah? So then build that into your decisioning profile and help drive.
That's hugely impactful in terms of the loan, right? Jared, obviously you sit in a slightly different spot. You're looking at the total banking industry at the Kenya Bankers Association. You're doing some deep dives into the way the economy is behaving. I've seen you actually touch on this alternative data story as well. What's your perspective on what's happening, and what's your bird's eye view?
Thank you, Ali Khan, and thanks TransUnion for the invite. First of all, I'd like to thank you for clarifying that I'm not a practitioner, because you started by saying you're asking practitioners questions, and you actually have done that. So I'm not a practitioner. So I'm basically going to give you some thoughts around what I've seen in this space, looking at the local market, as well as what's happening in the international scene. The first thing is that I think we are beyond the period where you can talk about doing pure business as usual, in the sense that you don't look at things from what makes sense to you, but you look at things from what makes sense from a customer's viewpoint. And I think this is coming very clear from the expectations of customers in the regime of technology and in the regime of other agencies coming into play in the market as we know it. Now, what has come through again is the fact that now behavioral orientation is becoming very, very critical. You can imagine that this is something that economists were looking at a long time ago. But last year, the Nobel in economics was in behavior.
Right.
Yeah, so that tells you that this is something that has come up very, very strongly. And of course, with behavior, you're talking about millennials that Lee talked about. You're talking about technology-savvy people who are coming through and demanding. You're talking about expectations in terms of productivity really being at the core, where productivity simply means you want quick decisions, you are very cost sensitive, and therefore you want things that make sense to you as a customer. So that's one area that I think has come up very, very strongly in terms of looking at that space. The second is really the regulatory aspects, because when you start seeing these things happen, the regulator also starts coming through. And I think there's one number that was given by Chad when he was talking about the South African case, where you have a number of active accounts and a number of them that are not performing. When you see the number of non-performing accounts generally being higher than those that are performing, then I think the regulator comes through immediately. In the local market, we started seeing a bit of noise, a bit of signals around how now you start regulating this space that is coming up very fast. And I think Lee also mentioned to you that whenever something new comes up, the regulator has to think about how to start looking at that particular market. So that's one area I think which also needs to be looked at very, very carefully. And I think linked to that is the aspect of competition. Because I don't know who said that if it works like a duck and
Sergey Lavrov.
Yes, but I think now if you have to question that, we'll say that if it works like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. In this case, it may not be a duck, because if you have been thinking that your competitor is a bank, and therefore if it looks like a bank, it talks like a bank, that is a bank, I think the space is completely different now. And I think you have to start looking at who are your competitors in the market and what are they doing better than you do. And I think this is where the technology aspect comes in if you start looking at it from a broader perspective. And I think this brings to the focus another thing that we used to hear a long time ago about core business. What's your core business? And start questioning yourself, is your core business doing lending? Because now there are so many other people who are doing that as a core business. And that's what really something that technology and the dynamics that we've talked about has really put a spotlight on. And the last one I think is what you alluded to in your very interesting analogy of somebody who is going to buy furniture and you probably think that is probably having looking for a mortgage. It's possible that that person has a new spouse. That's another thing.
That's another, yeah.
But I think the issue here is the difference between what economists call stated preference and revealed preference. What you reveal in your actions, what you reveal in what you're looking for, is what something that can point you towards what you actually need. So if you start having analytics that point to what you reveal in your behavior, then you can probably start seeing how business opportunity will emerge in other areas. And I think the analytics around this space are really going to be very critical in that sense. So I think in a broader sense, that's what I see happening in this very interesting, dynamic, and emerging market in which the banking industry evolves and operates at the moment.
Before I turn to Dr. Muthiga, I just want to touch on that point about who your competitors are and ask you, Lee. You said in your presentation, you kind of said your competitors are Apple, Facebook, Alibaba, and clearly this is the case, right? I mean, I met some guy who was working on Apple TV, and he said to me, we haven't gone live yet, Ali Khan, but when we do, we'll have 1.2 billion eyeballs from day one. How can you compete with that? He was kind of telling me, just give us a little bit more on what you were touching on in that point you were making.
So I guess the key thing is that we have a very specific notion of who our competitor is. So if you're a bank, then everyone's a bank. But the reality is that a bank is not a bank. The duck is actually a sheep dressed as a wolf, right? And you actually don't know what you don't know. I guess the point when somebody walks up and says, I'm going to capture the market, the question is, what are they capturing? They're actually winning over the heart and the mind, Michael, of the customer. Now, this notion of something we call a life stage trigger. So you may think, and we all think that, people, customers will not share our data with us. But Michael, I would challenge you and say that if customers get value in return for changing information, they're accepting of this agreement. As banks, as lenders, as an industry, we've had this long-held notion that, customers are going to hold back, right? But what we've found is that, as a bank X, whichever bank you are, you've got one lens of Lee Nike or Javed or Jared for that matter, but the universe of Lee Nike is more than just yourself. And I guess one of the things you talk about a differential competitor, what we call an experiential experience that the customer has, you as a bank need to be all things to me. And you wonder to yourself, how is it possible that a bank can be all things to me? Now, firstly, Jared, as a bank, we're going to be a rock star bank. Do what you say what you do. I expect that of you. But there are two further dimensions that a bank has to extend to. The bank as an advisor. Think of a scenario where you go to your bank for a non-financial conversation, right? Whether it's psychological and advice, whatever the advice is, it's education, it's travel. How do you go to them? And then that third dimension that the bank is missing is what I call a facilitator role, right? Now, when you close the circle of an amazing bank, of a value aggregator combined with the advisor together with the facilitator, we've actually seen banking growth grow globally. They say as much as a 2 to 3% top line growth can be seen when you start to become all things to me. Whether you call it a digital bank, a go-to bank, an everyday bank, as a bank starts to want to compete with your Facebooks and your Alibaba, bear in mind that the key differentiator, the basis of competition, is winning over the heart and the mind. It's the convenience, it's the instant gratification. And when you speak earlier about the monthly data flows, today's conversation, colleagues, is not about dashboards, right? If it's on a dashboard, it's actually too late, right? You got to catch me in my point of need, my time of need. If you're making a decision to enter a country, to make a decision whether to grant me credit, I would like to think, Ali Khan, that you'd have the data in front of you in real time. And we started to use this concept of intercepts, right? When something happens, a trigger happens for change, a new dependents come onto the books, a person's about to move house. We've been able to correlate in some countries with a high degree of precision. When someone moves a house, typically T minus X days before he actually moves into his house, he shops for a home loan, he shops for a car loan. Right? When you start to understand me in my point of need, you start to drive relevance. I think that's the point about competition. We've seen examples in the US, in South Africa, in Europe, where a bank's become a telco. I remember being on stage, Jared, with a large telco group COO, and I said, "Do you see that bank as a competitor?" He says, "No, it's a something on the side." Now, if I ask that same COO, is it a competitor? He says, "It's my biggest competitor." These are the same guys selling the most ICT hardware, the most ADSL, the most DSL lines, because no one cares how we come across. And our very relevance as banks is to reimagine, Ali Khan, and I use that word very specifically, reimagine what it is to be a bank, because as a customer, as a citizen, I don't really care. I have a set of needs, and I will attract or focus my attention to those that have the best chance of servicing those needs.
Excellent. Dr. Leonard Muthiga, we were just talking about the digital space at KCB, KCB M-Pesa. You've got a very evangelical CEO when it comes to the digital world. Tell us a little bit about your experience, and what are you trying to achieve, and what do you need to be one of those exponential digital banks? Which you are already, by the way.
Exactly. Thanks, Ali Khan, and thanks for everybody. I think you're right. We've been on a very growth path, especially on the digital space. But I think, let me give context to two things. One is fintech against what we are doing. So fintechs can be defined either within an institution or within outside an institution. And that's where we play most. And I want to quote one of the scholars from MIT. They run a center called Center for Digital Business, Prof. Joseph. He writes about three concepts: the platform, the crowd, and the core.
The platform, the crowd,
and the core. It's very analogy to what we are doing as KCB. So we've got to say, what is our platform and what shall take us there? Then what will other people do on our behalf? Now that's when you begin to segment what is my fintech as KCB, what is the fintech for the other people out there. And that's when the discussions of TransUnion comes very much alike. And I will, towards the end, mention about KYD, which is the other concept that informs how you grow. So as KCB, we've done a lot of work around ourselves and around enabling our digital, especially on some of the products that some of us have taken through. I was talking to our head of the business digital, who faces the customer. We currently do more than 100 million disbursements per day. The industry does probably 3-4 times that, plus other players.
100 million.
Correct, disbursements per day. Yeah, that tells us about the appetite that the market has. So, what can we do best? We can do best in giving these disbursements out there. But there are other partners who can do very many things around the second piece, which is the customer journeys. So the customer journeys could be, for example, the onboarding, the KYC, which I spoke about, the fulfillment, and matching those with services and products that we have. And again, I like the original discussion about customer first. So this is a lot of what you guys call CX, the customer experience. Now, it's very important for us as practitioners to know that we can never be the best in everything. And even in fulfilling these CX objectives, you've got to pair up what you can do best and what third parties can do best. So the third piece is the crowd. So the crowd is everybody out there, and put them in three circles. One is the crowd in social media. And I know you asked about somebody about when you tweet something, how much can we use that to understand you better? Indeed, as ourselves, we do have a crowd media solution that attempts to sieve out and make sense out of this data. Now, it's not easy.
Does it make sense?
Exactly. Now, that's the problem.
Because we do a lot of work in that space, and what I found is, first of all, linguistics. People don't speak in the way that the software is expecting them to speak. There's a lot of, particularly on the continent, I think, differences how people are speaking on all parts of the continent. Sorry.
And
And that brings out to something that is very important about how do you do data analysis or data analytics, whether it's behavioral, predictive, and what models you use. Yeah, and the sanctity of these models are going to sustain the integrity of how we serve this. So once you harness this, and we must be fair that we haven't done a very good job in analyzing this so-called big data. There's a lot of big buzzword around it, but we need to get almost scientific processes of getting this right through the proper models that are either predictive or behavioral or whichever science that comes through. And a lot of work has gone through here. I think we need to pair up with institutions or parties that do this and pair up with us and be able to make it smarter for the customer. So that's the crowd. The second piece about the crowd is the customer himself or herself. A lot of the things that we do must talk directly to what the customers are saying. So we want a product that is an asset, whether it's an asset in this format. For example, we spoke about the asset finance products, the personal lending. There's a corporate product, and we haven't spoken, by the way, much about corporate, and about the credit ratings and what can be done. That's a big topic that, guys, we need to invite you to talk about. So that's the crowd. The third part is the core. Now the core, as an institution, you have to declare what is your core business and what do you want to specialize in. In this world where everything is everything, you have to be very careful how you pick your battles and how you fight them. Otherwise, you'll end up having a lot of loose ends. And even for the banks that call themselves universal banks, if you look at them carefully, you'll actually see that there are areas that they have narrowed down to. And those are the areas that make sense to them. My last piece on this is what I call the KYD. Now, a lot of fintechs outside, say for example, mainstream, have a lot of data about customers, about citizens, and about everybody out there. It's important we then begin to create know your digital identity, because your digital identity is what comes very close to what somebody here shared as your reality. If you look at 360 feedback of all our digital identity, you will see our fears, you will see the things that we do that we really cherish, you will see what makes us tick, and if you combine that together, you get a very sensible KYD, which is significantly different from what we do as practitioners as KYC. And therefore, the portion for which, for example, we do a classical lending, which is based on credit scores that are very based about my payment history, my ability to pay, how long I've been around, what are the facilities I have. That's probably, I don't know, maybe less than 50% of most of the customers. If you look at the other spheres of their digital footprints and assess them carefully, you'll probably get another 30 to 40% piece that works for them. And that's what we need to sell through. Coming back to, I think, to TransUnion, it's important we spell out a gospel about how positive bureaus can be, because they are indeed positive. And that talks about how do you integrate with other parties to make the data that you have positive. Because a lot of us still classically think it's a listing. Our colleagues in credit collections have made this a weapon, almost a scary weapon. I think we need to take this more. It's now almost 10 years since the CRB Act was enacted. I think you guys have sufficient data to share among all the licensed CRBs in the market, so that we now begin to look at especially the new law on capping differently. Yeah, for us to continue the discourse that it will be repealed, we want it repealed, while that is okay, I think the discourse is what else can we do? And we have a lot of things that we can do differently and be more innovative. Thank you.
Lee, can I turn to you to give us a few thoughts on what you've been hearing from practitioners and from Yared?
Thank you. One, I think the good doctor and I are brothers, clearly. We were saying the same thoughts here. But a couple of thoughts, Ali Khan, to think about. I think the journey for Kenya has been a journey of good progress. You know, I was chatting to some colleagues before today about M-Pesa and where we are. I almost see M-Pesa as being the DNA of Kenya. it should stop being a thing, right?
It allowed us to reinvent ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that was how you got here. But what got you here will not get you to the next wave of growth. Now, like the good doctor said, within the constraints that we have in front of us, how do we find this next wave? Now, I must make a couple of points. One, my entire career has been in digital transformation, so I've seen this movie played out in many ways. A couple of things worth noting: it isn't about the data; it's actually about the question. Right? So when you talk about the constraints we have, the constraints either limit us, right? Or we remove the constraint and we set up our own visions that we want. I've been saying for a long time, data is data. Big data is just lots of data that your current systems can't actually process. But there's a concept I want to land today. Data science, a very simple English definition is, data science refers to what you don't know, you don't know. It's going to give you good nuggets that you look internal to your data, tells you what's going on. But when you start, and why I called us brothers was the notion of the why, the what, and the how. Nobody cares about how. And it sounds stark, Ali Khan, but we need to get over ourselves. We are not good at everything. When we recognize what we're not good at doing, then you open up our points of collaboration. You break down the walls that said, I've got to start from scratch every time. Here's the scary part. Every single thing we've spoken about today, I've seen it working somewhere in the world, right? Whether it's a life stage trigger that says trigger the whole universe of Lee Nike and tell me when something's happening, or whether it's saying, as data comes through the door, how do you in a real-time way drive conversion, right? Or how do you find Lee before he becomes a pre-delinquent? Before I go bad, can you find me? And think about that. You as bank come up and say, Lee Nike, I can see you have a problem. Can I help you? How would it make me feel about my bank? And it feels that a bank, it's very hard and dry and rigid. But that emotive language, that return to humanity, whether you're TransUnion or the bank, it's all on us as leaders to put that forward in what we do. And you make the point about a bureau. I always say to my clients, I'm not my grandfather's credit bureau. I wasn't here in 1901. I could care less what you call me. The question is, how do we co-create the value that drives the KPIs and the values that our shareholders are looking for? When I talk about a better life for all, every morning I wake up, that's what drives my purpose. If I can work with my colleagues internally to solve problems that we care about, surely that's what should drive us. And the point is, around this panel, you've got some amazing conversation, discourse happening. If we cooperate, collaborate, can we solve the problems that present itself to ourselves in Kenya, right? But if we don't come together, Ali Khan, right, then the opportunity will never be realized. We all talk about by 2030, and Jared can confirm this, that 5 of the top 10 countries globally, the highest growth, 5 of the top 10 come from this African continent we live in, right? But that's the theory, Jared. For us to realize that theory, the potential must be realized when we break down those things that hold us back from realizing the potential, right? Data, Ali Khan, is the lifeblood that flows to the digital economy, right? Gartner calls data the new oil. I'm saying it's a lifeblood. It runs through the veins of all these countries across Africa. But we need to embrace it, right, as something that's valuable, not just as a commodity. If we're looking at a report, it's too late. The world we live in requires us to be a lot more agile, lots more responsive. But it requires us, out of necessity, to question everything about who we are today.
Wow. Let me just give you a couple
Ali,
of
if I could
things. Sure.
just add a quick point on that. Can I just like to pick up on Dr. Mtega's comment? Yeah? Michael Forbes says the best vision is insight. Yeah? And I think as bureaus, kind of like talking about us putting the message out there, reality is we didn't do a good job at really getting the industry to really appreciate what you're all about. Yeah, that's really the message that we're now pushing out there. It's really about, and we see this when you ask for appointments. It's like, why do you want to talk to me? Yeah? But what we're now doing is really go back and create insights, yeah, that would be relevant to a decision maker in an organization who's trying to think about, how can I upsell to this customer of mine? Where are my next bookings really going to come from? Yeah? So we're definitely going to do more of that, provide those insights, and then just a quick comment, because I think it's an important space on the SME space. I don't know. I agree. As an industry, we haven't done a lot of justice to that space. Some challenges are really just about the right data is still not there to really help drive some of these insights that you're looking for. But we are very actively engaged in very interesting discussions around how do we get better digitized data around registries, information about the owners, the principal linkages. So we are starting to get some interesting data that will help us provide more insights for banks to make decisions around the SME space, because today they're viewed as risky. But it's a big challenge we've taken upon ourselves to look at what's the alternative data we can get out there that can specifically help enhance the insights that we deliver around the SME space to enable institutions or banking institutions really grow in that space and be more confident to lend in that space.
I just want to add a couple of thoughts to what was being said. There's a very famous quote, going back to your question point, by an American writer I like called Don DeLillo, and he says, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. And I thought that was an interesting conjunction. And then someone else, it's said a lot, but 1 + 1 can equal 2, or it can equal 11. Now, my other question to you guys is this. I mean, nobody here, and we would be immensely arrogant and full of hubris if we thought we were, has a 360-degree view on what we're seeing. The speed and velocity of what we're seeing is unprecedented. I remember the old days of the old phone. I remember 12 years ago building a tower to get a 32 internet connection in Mombasa. That tower cost me $3,600, and whenever the market started to get interesting, the connection would drop, so it wasn't even worth. And today, whatever it is on my mobile, the smartphone. So how do we create, you guys obviously got a business to do, you've got your offerings stuff, but how do we create an environment where people at Equity, KCB, across all the spectrum of our new financial universe, collaborate to make that 1 + 1 = 11 for themselves and for the industry? And I don't know whether either of you would care to take that on before I go for some closing comments.
So I've been on this journey for 18 months, and a large part of what I had to do is almost start by saying, hi, my name is Lee, and it doesn't matter who I work for, right? Because the immediate connotation, you're a bureau, you're in a box, right? However, part of our redefinition as TransUnion is becoming information and risk services provider. But even that sounds a little fancy, right? The question is, there's value to be had. Almost my approach, and this is, I think, something we want to be challenged on in Kenya. On my journey back in South Africa, the conversations I have with chairpersons of boards, with CEOs, it isn't about risk or even data or even dashboards. When you talk to somebody about growth, right, about expansion, these are conversations that pique the minds of CEOs and boards. I think even us as practitioners, when we have our conversations, we end up having always a myopic or a naive silo or lens that we use. We've got to expand that definition. When you talk to a CEO of a bank that's losing customers to the fintech, guess what? It's how do you help retain the customers? Can I see that Leonard's unhappy before it happens, right? And then a lot of what I've been doing in terms of my team and how we approach it is, let's put ourselves at risk, because I may not know the answer, neither may you, but let's stack hands and let's walk it together. And there's some amazing examples just south from here in South Africa that I'd bring here tomorrow. We've launched something called Quick Vet for Business. We have 1 million SMEs in South Africa. We have a bank that launched a model using digital onboarding for SMEs. In the last few months, they've onboarded 30,000 business customers like this. Full digital onboarding, seamless, right? So the question is, put the question forward, stack hands, get into room, close the door, and leave with the answer. It doesn't need to come off the shelf. The notion of questioning everything about our business, Ali Khan, requires us to reimagine. Stack hands knowing that we don't know all the answers, but together we can do so much more. And for myself at TransUnion and the leadership and the team that's here is to say, we're not our grandfather's credit bureau. We've got tons and tons of data. Even the data we haven't answered some of the questions that matter to you. Let's work together. We can't be colluding and doing it together, but individually, let's focus. Like I'm hearing today, we're all about digital and disruption and relevance, but let's start to challenge the norms of how we approach it. And from my side, you have my support as the African leader for TransUnion to, rock the boat, challenge it, break down some of these walls on my side to bring you some of these things. And remember, we are in 33 countries around the world. There are few things I've heard in the time I've been here this week that I haven't seen elsewhere. And it's a bunch of a couple of emails or a few phone calls. We'll bring it here, right? There are things that we will lead with, like mobile loan scorecard and Nipasha. The guys in Canada, you wouldn't believe the story. My colleagues in Canada said, why can't I get Nipasha in Canada? And we think that we're not good enough to serve the rest of the world. And I'm saying, of course we are. Equally so, we can bring that here. We don't need to start from scratch every single time. So for me, at a TransUnion perspective, I'm saying, how do we collaborate to drive the potential, not just in Kenya, but in Africa, Ali Khan?
Can I just turn to everybody to give everyone an opportunity for some closing remarks? If I can turn to you first, Michael, for some thoughts from your side.
My comments will largely be starting from what Lee has mentioned. There is power in collaboration. If we look at our business and what we've been able to do, we've not really done it alone. And if I was to try, so let's say, one of the line businesses that we have, our diaspora remittances, and probably right now we're the largest recipients of diaspora remittances. But we never did it differently. We never did like the traditional way of saying, okay, I'll go into do a roadshow in the States and tell them I can be able to receive diaspora remittances. I'll partner with PayPal. I'll partner with Zoom and give fintech solutions that are collaborative enough. But what Dr. was talking about, the core, our core is I'll give you an API, receive the payments, facilitate movement of the facilities, and that you stick to the core. Today, a lot of us in the banking industry are looking at fintechs as a threat. I want to look at it differently. They are a source of innovation. Today, you want to get into the customer's mind. A lot of us in the industry are looking at this space as it's another project I want to put on the side, and I don't make it the everyday. But partner with a fintech, they'll make the journey of the customer their business. They'll make gamification of the customer their business. They'll make stickiness of the business of the customer your business. And you realize that collaboration will create more value than looking at it as a competition. A lot of and I agree with you what you're talking about. We've talked about mobile money in this country, and every time we think about it, it's M-Pesa. But no one is talking about what PesaLink is doing. There's a lot of, and if you have to think about it, and people have to sit back and say, let's collaborate and create this platform, you're moving huge amounts of money. Today, we're disbursing huge amounts of money on the mobile. 97% of our transactions today as Equity Bank are outside the banking transactions. It is not about the bank. It's not about, and every time I talk about Equity Bank, most people think about it's my mother's bank. It's the bank changed. But when you think about it, it's because of collaborations like that creates that value. And the core still sticks. The core is partnerships, the core is payments, the core is store of value. That will always be at the core of it. But in terms of that customer, what does that collaboration? And as you do that, then you don't have to really think about sourcing data. I have challenged a lot about becoming a solution provider in understanding the customer. But beyond that, they are not the universal way of understanding the customer. There are very many other contact points about the customer that you can be able to leverage on. And as you do that, upsell, cross-sell, that will be part of your core business. And as you do that, your business become everyday relevant. I mentioned earlier, it's because it's a lifestyle issue that you're going to facilitate. The customer moved. The customer is no longer looking for your sleek business banking halls. The customer just wants a gadget. How present are you on that particular gadget? How relevant are you? How do you understand me as a customer? And that is what will drive the conversation of digital every single day. We have to be digital natives if we have to progress this business beyond what it is today.
Interesting point you're making about being on the gadget. Last year, Jack Ma visited here, and one of the comments he said, he was saying for Africa, it's all about visibility on my platform. And I think, he wasn't being arrogant. It was a fact that if you were on the platform, you're reaching a market of 1 billion Chinese.
Sorry, and that conversation is becoming more relevant. The other day I was trying something, and today we are talking about cross-border. Everyone is waiting for Ethiopia to open up, and everyone is talking about, but how are you going to go into Ethiopia? You're not going to go and put up structures there. It won't work. The other day I bought something on AliExpress. That is breaking the borders. They present something on your phone and you buy it. You take a chance on it, spend 3,000 shillings. Let's see whether that item comes to me. It will come. Eventually it comes to me. But what does that do? You've created a platform for payments. You've created a platform for relevant on that particular space and moved towards. That is what is going to grow us into that particular space. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. And now if I can turn to Javed. Javed, how does it look from where you're sitting?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's quite fascinating. The discussion around we are having today is. I think I'd like to point towards one area, which is the cost of doing business today that we have. We simply cannot afford to continue to do it. With the help of collaboration, we actually need to grow the industry, and then all the banks will grow. The customer will grow. If today, I just don't want to name any bank, but if you look at a retail bank, anywhere in the world, the cost to income ratio ranging between 50, 60, even 70, 80%. Can you sustainably grow in the era that you're already stepped into? It's not that you're heading towards, you stepped into there. As we said, 40 billion US dollar transactions over mobile, almost with zero cost. And with this brick and mortar, with this big, large army of people, how sustainable we are. So I think for this collaboration, for the initiatives that, from TransUnion we have been hearing, in my mind, through this workshop, how we can address it better, how we can be more nimble in our feet, and how we can reduce those costs. And let me tell you one thing, in this interest rate bill, right, we're still charging 14%, which is far, far higher than a lot of other markets. You have to wait for something worse to come. I'm sure all the bankers are here. We are sending feedback to Kenya Bankers Association on a new bill, which will even restrict you from making more money. So I think, with this collaboration, only thing I can look at, apart from data, big data analysis, how we can create ourselves more productive, how I can make 20,000 application with almost free of any intervention, and then make it through and through digital. I think I'm quite looking forward through this workshop. Yeah.
Jared.
I've spent the last almost 2 years doing analytic work around the interest rate capping and how it should be removed. So I'm happy that you're happy with the 14%, so I probably shouldn't spend much more time on this. But let me just say 3 things. The first one is that it's not for lack of data. As a matter of fact, it's about what you do with the data. And that is really why, to me, it's very important to start looking at this from a collaborative standpoint. Because now institutions, including banks, have a lot of data that they don't use for their decision-making process. So it's what you do with the data. The second is that I think we have to start looking at how, as an industry, we can remain relevant and contribute towards the economy's progress. I think we probably might have missed a lesson at some point when the World Bank was everything. Until the World Bank realized that they cannot be able to provide financing more than the commercial lenders can. And they started remodeling themselves into things like advisory and knowledge and all that. So they invest more in research than they invest in giving money for projects. And this is a point that I think knowledge leadership combined with analytics is going to be the way forward in my mind. And the third is looking beyond our local area of operation. People praised the Wakanda economy in the movie Black Panther. The biggest limitation of the Wakanda economy is that it was a closed economy. I don't know whether you saw that from the movie. The moment you start thinking regional, the moment you start thinking global, then you are really making yourself more relevant each day. Now, how you do that depends on to what extent you want to leverage on technology to take you forward. Because with technology, there are no geographical boundaries. The universe becomes your market. I think those are the three things that we think through as we engage our minds to this aspect of technology and analytics and data in a bigger way. Thank you.
Dr. Muthiga.
No, mine will be simple, and it's two principles. One is the integration of market participants, which is some of this has been said, and the other one is very briefly on automation of intelligence. We've spoken about how we will collaborate. It's incumbent upon us as practitioners to genuinely integrate market participants across the board. Whether it's within ourselves as lending institutions, whether it's the other parties that feed in different processes, technology plays a big one there. And the emerging fintechs are probably some of the best ones that we can use to integrate market participants much smarter. The government also has done a lot of work on that. There's a classical case of, for example, the e-citizen platform, which integrates all of us with government services, with institutions like ourselves. We have also a classical example in a program called Inua Jamii, which uses institutions to churn out monies out there. I'll give you an interesting statistics. In the last 1 month, as KCB, we onboarded new account holders through this platform of close to 400,000. So these are persons who, through the network, we know there's and through integration, there's predetermined payment patterns. We can use this to include them in the economy formally. So that's a big point there, to integrate all market participants. The last piece is around automating intelligence, and again, they're big words about machine learning, but they're very simple things. The data that we hold, and I think my colleague here mentioned about lenders have a lot of information. That information is actually intelligence that we haven't harnessed properly, and we must be feeling guilty and look for ways of doing it. Because there are two fashions of intelligence. So there's artificial intelligence, which is creating patterns out of it, but there's augmented intelligence, which is now using what we have plus other factors, which are probably behavioral or others that are not subject to data, which are more quantitative, to make even better decisions. And this is why the likes of Google Assistants, the likes of Alexi, and all these kind of things, if you combine those, and that's what we need to do, and it's very, very simple. I need to say this. It's not rocket science, and let's not be caught up by the big words. It's combining, for example, you have your history, you have your biodata, you have your history of payments, you have your history of bills. On the other side, you want to do these aspirations. Those are actually intelligences that you can use to predict yourself and augment them now, so that when you meet, for example, in our scenario, when you meet a customer, you can augment that intelligence by saying and giving us perspectives that help us. I think those two factors are probably what I will conclude with. Again, And more importantly, thanking, of course, the colleagues here for arranging this, and more importantly for KBA as well. It's played a big role in trying to bring those alive to us. Thanks.
I think that's a big opportunity for a leadership position for you guys in terms of bringing everybody together. But may I have your comments?
I guess my final words is that there is no such thing as perfection. I reckon that perfection is now a work in progress, Jared. It's an ongoing work in progress. And the second we forget that, that'll realize our oblivion. It'll realize our demise, right? So it's important to always be edgy, never be comfortable in our current reality. And once that edginess is there, it allows us to keep differentiating and changing. And like you said, every day is a different thing, right? But for us to really be consumer first, I would say that we need to challenge some of the orthodoxies that are well held in this industry. There are people, there are policies, there are documents that tell us who we need to be. I'm saying we should challenge those things, right? So we've got to find a way by collaboration or individually, because it is a competitive landscape after all. How we challenge the orthodoxies, put the consumer first, right? And then think about how we drive our relevance. And then finally, I'd say, like we've said over and over again today, we don't need more data. The data's there. We have not been asking the right questions, number one, and two, we haven't been providing the sponsorship to get from the question to the answer, because the data is there, the question's evolving, right? So whether it's turning to someone like TransUnion or beating up the guys internal to your organization to drive the value, that's got to be there, because the answers are lying around, Ali Khan. We just haven't found the sponsorship. And like I keep saying, our challenges in Africa are not unique. This is Wakanda, for sure, right? It is Wakanda forever, but Wakanda is a collection of breaking down the walls, looking for, our vibranium, right? Leveraging the IP from elsewhere and saying, we've got the raw materials, we've got the people, we've got the passion. This is Africa after all, but let's work together to realize our potential. And by 2030, maybe it won't be 5, maybe it'll be 7 of the 10, Jared. It's up to us to do that. This is Wakanda, you're right.
Billy, how are you going to turn this into a better, more revenue for yourself as an institution, but more revenue for these folks as well? Where are the quick wins that they can go back to James or go back to Lamine or go back to Joshua and say, guys, this is a no-brainer, here we go? You've got to give that path.
At this moment, my team looks at me for that elevator sales pitch, yeah? All right, no, but for me, it's really, I mean, we've kind of like at a high level shown, what's these capabilities that are there, what you're working on, and that's what we really wanted to expose the attendees and the industry to. And what I really just want to put out there is challenges. We really want the industry to challenge us, because that's what our business is. And interesting enough, one of the guys who's really put us on the spot is Michael here. And I remember the initial discussions when he sent back the team with the data they were showing him, and they're a little bit frustrated. They're like, no, that's good. That's actually really cool. He's challenging us, yeah? And that's what we want to do. That's really the engagements we want to make with you. It's really go back and push us and tell us, I want better insights. You have the data, just come back and give me better insights, yeah? When I'm having my strategy discussions, be it, the CEO of the bank or a head of product, give me insights. This is really what I want to see. If I'm not getting it there yet, push us back, those are the kind of engagements we want to have, very more consultative. It's us going back and cooking this data, making it more visible to you in terms of the insights that we deliver, because we really want to be part of, really a partner to the banks in terms of delivering these strategies and helping them, figure out, what are these opportunities to grow and have better sight to that extra dollar that, as an institution, we are looking for. Yeah? And then the final one also is, remember, at the end of the day, the better data I have for you, the better insights I have for you there, out there, the more value I'll deliver. Yeah? So don't look at it like what we have today is what is available, but in case you have certain insights that you want to see from the industry, certain data that can help your value proposition in terms of just your strategies or products, make it our problem. We'll go out there and look for that data and bring the right insights to you.
I'd like to thank my panel for really, I thought, a very rich discussion. thanking Michael. I'd like to thank Javed, Jared, Dr. Muthiga, Lee and Billy for what was a very interesting conversation.